A species is defined as a fertile group that can produce the same offspring that will also be fertile and continue the cycle of life. If this is possible, you must be the same species.
Hi, I'm Okoye Yakini Amos, and thank you for watching this documentary. Did you know that the term race is a misnomer and that the term was coined to implement a classification system based on physical characteristics such as skin color, eye color, hair texture, and other phenotypical features? A hierarchy, if you will. But what the proponents of this concept didn't realize is that there are so many people that look entirely different that it's impossible to divide those populations to just a handful of groups. Did you also know that in 2003, the Human Genome Project concluded that 99.9% of all human beings are the same? Each and every one of us is a walking history book filled with different chapters written by the genetic codes that we inherited from our parents, which ultimately make us who we are. According to the Census Bureau, there are over 7 billion people in the world. But have you ever stopped to think about where we all come from? Our origins, our beginnings, our genesis, our roots, how we get our different hair texture, our eye color and skin color. So join me as I retrace the lineage of all humans using empirical science to show that there's no such thing as race, and no matter what ethnicity, nationality, color, or race you claim to be, we all come from the same descendants who migrated out of Africa thousands of years ago.
If you want to trace down the genes, you're going to eventually narrow down to Africa.
We stopped seeing evolution as one line. It's a tree with many, many branches. We know that we all share a common ancestor that lived in Africa between 200 and 150,000 years before today.
Race is something that humans created. Genetically, we're all the same.
We all descend from one small population.
All humans have a single origin.
The word epistemology refers to how one acquires knowledge. With that being said, the great scholar Fred Kerlinger asserts that there are 4 ways in which people acquire knowledge or learning. Number 1, the method of intuition. Number 2, the method of tenacity. Number 3, the method of authority. And number 4, the method of science. Now, the method of intuition asserts that you have a preconceived assumption, belief, or answer about something based on nothing solid or concrete. For example, you may believe that there are other life forms that exist on other planets. You've never been to another planet and can't prove it, but you have this intuition, this belief that there's life on another planet. The method of tenacity asserts that some things that you've been taught or learned, whether right or wrong, you'll hold on to those beliefs tenaciously, like a dog holding on to a bone, and you'll reject those things that you believe aren't true if they don't line up with your thinking. For example, you may tenaciously believe that the Trojan War really happened, no matter how much evidence shows it's only a myth. Now, the majority of you watching this documentary have acquired knowledge or learning through Curlinger's third category, which is the method of authority. For example, what is your name? Let's say your name is Thomas. Then who told you your name is Thomas? An authoritative figure such as your mother or father, and then agreement comes into play. You hear everyone around you call you Thomas, so you say, my name must be Thomas. Another example, if I ask you what's the name of that bright yellow glowing object in the sky, your answer would be the sun. Well, who told you that's the sun? An authoritative figure such as your teacher at school, and then agreement comes into play. You notice that everyone else around you calls it the sun, so you say that must be the sun. Well, the same thing applies to race. Who told you you're black? Who told you you're white? Who told you you're Asian? Who told you you're Hispanic? An authoritative figure such as the dominant culture you live in, your parents, teachers, books, television, and then once again, agreement comes into play. You hear others refer to you as those names, so you say, I must be black, white, Asian, Hispanic, etc. Now, the last method of learning that Curlinger referred to is the method of science, in particular, empirical science. Now, the word empirical means what can be validated or rejected due to observation or experiment. This method of science is anchored in objectivity and is unaffected by personal beliefs, perceptions, biases, or political correctness. Arguably, the greatest tenet of the method of science is that it significantly eliminates human error and conjecture. So in order to fully understand this documentary, you must first strip your mind of any intuitions, tenacious beliefs, or authoritative ways that you've been taught, and pay close attention to the scientific evidence that will be presented to you.
Every human on this planet has a common ancestral origin. It's not a coincidence, accident, or strange occurrence that we're here, but a testament to a complex system of genetic variants combined with DNA reproduction that has been continuously occurring for thousands of years. There are 7 continents that make up the entire world. North America, South America, Asia, Europe, Africa, Australia, and Antarctica. Together they combine to account for the 7 billion people who live on the earth. There are several theories that have evolved over the years to explain the origin of races. Some stem from biology, while others stem from biblical accounts. One theory in particular stems from the research of German anthropologist Johann Friedrich Blumenbach. Born in 1752, Blumenbach is considered to be the founder of physical and scientific anthropology. In his book entitled On the Natural Varieties of Mankind, Blumenbach contends that there are 5 different races from which all of humanity originates from. The Caucasians, which represent the white race. The Mongolians, which represent the yellow race. The Ethiopians, which represent the black race. The Americans, which represent the red race. And the Malays, which represent the brown race. Blumenbach's theory is commonly referred to as the polygenetic origin of mankind. That is, mankind began in multiple places at the same time. Science doesn't necessarily agree with Blumenbach's assertion.
When you talk about polygynous origin for anatomically modern humans, then the answer is no. You can't have like multiple ancestors giving rise to one thing. One of them has to be the ancestor, and then not all of them. There is only one lineage that eventually gave rise to anatomically modern Homo sapiens.
If Blumenbach's theory of polygenetic origin is correct, then we would have to find the oldest human fossil remains in those 5 places as he asserts. They would have to be dated to be the same age or older than the one found in Africa. Scientifically, this has not occurred. In other words, the grandchildren can't be older than the grandparents. Africa is the grandparent. The other 4 in Blumenbach's theory are the grandchildren.
We had competing models, competing hypotheses. In that case, I've just explained to the multi-regional and the recent out-of-Africa models. And over the last 4 decades, almost everything that we've discovered supports the recent out-of-Africa model.
Still, a handful of scholars maintain that mankind did not originate in Africa, but in other areas of the world, most notably Australia. But once again, science doesn't necessarily agree.
The earliest occurrence of anatomically modern Homo sapiens in Australia is about 60,000 years ago, whereas anatomically modern Homo sapiens have been evolving in Africa as early as 200,000 years ago. We have the fossil evidence for that. If you go, for example, to somewhere in, say India or anywhere in the world, and you find convincingly anatomically modern Homo sapiens from 230,000 years ago, then you falsify that out of Africa hypothesis. You say, no, you're wrong, because I have anatomically modern Homo sapiens from X part of the world at 230,000 years ago. Then you can argue the other way around, that modern humans actually evolved somewhere else and came to Africa. But based on the fossil record that we have, the earliest record of anatomic model Homo sapiens was found in Africa, particularly in Ethiopia, from 2 places, and then they diversify from there.
So we begin our journey here in Ethiopia, a country located in East Africa. Now you're probably asking yourselves, why start here in Ethiopia of all places? It's because empirical science has proven that humanity began here and that Africa is the birthplace to the first human beings to ever walk the face of this earth.
In 1948, archaeologists discovered the fossil remains of Proconsul africanus in Lake Victoria, Kenya. Proconsul africanus is estimated to be 22 million years old. In 1974, archaeologists discovered the fossil remains of Lucy in Hardor, Ethiopia. Lucy is estimated to be over 3 million years old. In 2010, American anthropologist Johannes Haile Selassie found fossil remains older than Lucy, also in Ethiopia. This discovery was called Kadanumu. Kadanumu is estimated to be over 3.5 million years old. Africa is also the location where the oldest fossil remains of Homo erectus were found. Homo erectus is estimated to be 1.8 million years old. And finally, Africa is the location where the oldest fossil remains of our species, Homo sapiens, were found. The fossils of Homo sapiens are estimated to be between 200 and 150,000 years old.
Now, in case you're wondering how archaeologists can determine the age of bones discovered, you'll find that their methodology is very rigorous and highly effective. It's called organ-organ dating.
Organ-organ dating is one of the dating methods which we call absolute dating method that we use to date fossils. When we date fossils that are millions of years old, we don't date the fossils themselves. What we date are the rocks that are above and below the fossils. And those rocks have to be volcanogenic, meaning they must have erupted from the magma because they have all the elements that we need for the dating purpose. Lucy and Kadanumu were dated in the same process of dating, meaning we sample rocks from above the fossils and also from below the fossils. So if you have like an age from the above of 3.69 and you have an age from below of 3.7, the fossils in between will have to be between 3.7 and 3.69. This is a simple law of superposition. Okay, what comes above is always younger than what's below it. If I put this paper first and put another paper on top of it, obviously I put that paper later than the paper below it. Okay, this is what's called law of superposition. This has been figured out since like the 16th century.
The geographical location of Ethiopia is very important due to its close proximity to the equator. This means that Ethiopia and surrounding regions have a subtropical climate. A subtropical climate is defined as regions that have extremely high heat, lasting throughout the majority of the year. Unlike most regions that experience 4 seasons, subtropical regions typically have 2 seasons, summer and winter, with the coldest month of winter averaging a mild 50 degrees, and the hottest months of summer oftentimes exceeding 100 degrees. So if science tells us that mankind was born in East Africa, what does science tell us about how mankind survived the intense heat of Africa? After all, there was no sunscreen during that time, no sunblock, or air conditioning. To ensure human survival against the brutal African heat, there was one very important element that nature equipped mankind with. That was melanin.
The etymology of the word melanin comes from the Greek word melanos, which means black. Melanin has played a very salient role in the genesis of mankind.
Melanin is basically the #1 skin defense system against the ultraviolet rays of the sun. It comes in 3 forms. You have what's called eumelanin, which is a dark brown to black pigment. And there is another form of melanin called pheomelanin, which is more prevalent in redheads and people with blonde hair. And so it gives the skin a more yellow or reddish appearance.
So people who have more melanin, who have darker skin, have more natural protection. And people with paler skin have less natural protection. They have less ability to make melanin.
We owe a great level of gratitude to melanin. Without melanin, mankind would have been severely scorched and burned, especially in the arid areas of Eastern Africa. In addition, without nature giving the indigenous people melanin, it would have just been a matter of time before skin cancer would have wiped out the population of the planet due to the intense sun and heat. In other words, you nor I or anyone else would be here on this planet.
The study of human genetics is simply amazing. Earlier in the documentary, we talked about how all humans' DNA can be traced back to a very small population that lived in Africa between 150 and 200,000 years ago. Considering that there are 7 billion people on the earth, it's mind-boggling to imagine how we're all genetically connected to the same small group. In this section, we're going to show you scientifically how geneticists were able to come to that conclusion. When you watch crime shows such as CSI Miami or Forensic Files, the crux of the shows involve connecting the dots scientifically by linking the people involved through DNA. The latter is the same process geneticists use to connect the dots to show the genetic tree from which we all come from. Those dots are the Y chromosome and mitochondrial DNA?
DNA is a molecule, and it is a molecule that's inside of every one of our cells, and it includes all of the hereditary instructions for the traits that we express. So from a molecular standpoint, it's a phenomenal molecule because it has the ability to self-replicate. So if I'm making a sperm to pass on to a child, I am copying DNA that I inherited from my parents, who inherited it from their parents, all the way back to the beginning of time.
The human body is made of many parts that work together in an organized system. One of the most important systems in our body is DNA reproduction from generation to generation. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. It contains the biological instructions that make each individual unique. Our DNA is wrapped in an egg-shaped structure called chromosomes. Each person has 23 pairs of chromosomes. Our chromosomes are found in the nucleus. Inside the nucleus resides 3 billion cells known as nucleotides, which are identified by the letters A, T, C, and G. The A stands for adenine. The T stands for thymine. The C stands for cytosine. And the G stands for guanine. These are the 4 building blocks that make up our DNA. Every male and female are connected to each other through an intricate gene pool of our DNA. For the female, it's referred to as mitochondrial DNA, and it's passed down from mother to her children. But only the daughter can pass the gene down to the next generation. For the male, it's referred to as the Y chromosome, and it's passed down from father to son. In the early days of studying human genetics, geneticists studied the 3 billion nucleotides to analyze how genes behaved over time, but found it to be difficult. As a result, they began to look at the mitochondria, which is found outside of the nucleus. Simply put, analyzing the mitochondrial DNA was more effective and less tedious in examining human relationships than analyzing the nucleotides. Geneticists soon began to take DNA samples from people all over the world, most notably from Africa, Asia, Europe, Australia, and New Guinea. Their results were conclusive. The mitochondrial DNA of all females comes from a woman who lived in Africa around 200,000 years ago. Equally as important as the mitochondrial DNA is the Y chromosome. Just as the mitochondrial DNA is transmitted through its female lineage, the Y chromosome DNA is transmitted through the male lineage. Geneticists were eager to analyze the Y chromosome to see if it would produce similar results as the mitochondrial DNA. Hence, geneticists began to collect DNA samples from men from all over the world. Once again, geneticists concluded that all men today can trace their Y chromosome lineage to a common male ancestor who lived in Africa thousands of years ago. The results of the studies were twofold. First, that Africans are the oldest group in the world. And second, that our species, Homo sapiens, originated on the continent of Africa and no place else.
Now, clearly, you can take a fossil from the Herto site in Ethiopia that is dated to 160 and compare it to us, and you wouldn't see a difference.
So there is a concordance between the genetic evidence and also the fossil evidence to indicate that anatomically modern humans originated in Africa.